Have you ever looked at a T-Rex and wondered, why does it look like that? That towering body, the dragging tail, the almost comically tiny arms, it's become one of the most iconic dinosaur designs in the world. But the truth is, this image didn't come from the fossil record overnight. It was built piece by piece, guess by guess, over more than a century of science, speculation, and imagination. Our story begins in 1902 in Hell Creek, Montana. Two paleontologists, Barnum Brown and Richard Lull, uncovered the first remains of what would later be named Tyrannosaurusrex. But they didn't find a complete dinosaur, not even close. All they had were 36 bones, part of a lower jaw, a femur, a few vertebrae, and a pubic bone. That's about 10% of the full skeleton. Still, those bones were so massive, so unlike anything they'd ever seen, that Henry Fairfield Osborn, the scientist who officially described the creature, declared it a brand new genus. He called it Tyrannosaurusrex, or Tyrant Lizard King, due to its size, which dwarfed any known land predator at the time. But how do you draw a creature when you've only got a tenth of it? That challenge fell to William D. Matthews Osborn's colleague, who created the first ever illustration of T-Rex in 1905. In that drawing, the dinosaur stands upright like a kangaroo, with its tail dragging along the ground, and tiny arms sticking forward like awkward little ornaments. It's a strange, stiff, almost cartoonish posture, but with so little to go on, it was their best guess. Everything they didn't know, like the shape of the tail, the alignment of the spine, the proportions of the head, was filled in by imagination. What's fascinating is that they decided to keep those little arms. Nobody said, "That can't be right, let's ignore them." No, they were confident those arms were part of the same animal, and they were right. In hindsight, it's amazing they didn't assume the arms belonged to a baby dinosaur or a completely different creature. But no early paleontologists embraced the absurdity and leaned into it. A massive predator with tiny, almost useless-looking arms. Sure, why not? A year later, in 1906, artist L.M. Sterling redrew T-Rex with more anatomical accuracy based on the same bones. His version was more refined, carefully labeling which bones were real and which parts were hypothetical. Still, it was just a skeleton. The muscle, the skin, the full creature, all of that remained a mystery. Then came Charles R. Knight, a legendary paleo artist who was commissioned to illustrate a full-living T-Rex in 19. His version shaped how generations would view the creature. He gave T-Rex thick green skin, scaly lips, a stocky tail, and a crocodile-like face. Why? Because back then, reptiles were the closest modern comparison they had. Salamanders, lizards, and crocodiles, those were the visual references. Knight's T-Rex looked like a giant salamander standing upright. It was powerful, fearsome, and alien. What's more, the influence of Knight's drawing lasted for decades. T-Rex became a slow-moving, tail-dragging, green-scaled monster in museums, books, and eventually movies. Even its mouth, with scaly lips covering its teeth, was modeled after amphibians and reptiles. And yet that was only the beginning. In just a few years, T-Rex would march straight from the pages of science into the world of film culture and imagination. And once Hollywood got involved, the legend of the T-Rex would grow bigger, louder, and more terrifying than ever before. The moment T-Rex stepped out of science and into cinema, everything changed. No longer confined to the dusty halls of museums or the quiet pages of academic journals, the Tyrant Lizard King was about to become a global superstar. And it all began in 1918 with a groundbreaking short film called The Ghost of Slumber Mountain. Though primitive by today's standards, this stop-motion film was revolutionary at the time. It featured a dramatic battle between a T-Rex and a triceratops, two creatures that had never before been animated in motion. For audiences in 1918 who had never seen dinosaurs move, this was pure magic. The T-Rex was portrayed as a slow, lumbering beast, dragging its tail, stomping forward like an angry reptilian bulldozer. This visual style tail on the ground, upright posture, visible teeth, would soon become the default dinosaur pose for generations. But it was in 1933 that T-Rex truly became a movie legend thanks to King Kong. In one of the most iconic fight scenes in cinema history, the giant ape clashes with a ferocious Rex in a violent, bone-crunching duel. The T-Rex here is scaly, hulking, and utterly menacing. With every growl and snap of its jaws, it cements its place as the ultimate predator of the prehistoric world. This scene wasn't just memorable, it was myth-making. For millions of viewers, this was the first time they ever saw a T-Rex, and the image stuck. At this point, Hollywood wasn't interested in scientific accuracy. T-Rex wasn't a dinosaur, it was a monster, a symbol of untamed nature, raw power, and primal fear, and the public loved it. With no internet and limited access to academic resources, most people had no way of knowing how real dinosaurs behaved. Instead, their understanding of T-Rex came from films, posters, and adventure novels. This gave filmmakers enormous creative freedom, and they used it to shape T-Rex into a pop culture icon. But not every portrayal was pure fantasy. In 1940, Disney released Fantasia, an ambitious animated film that for the first time consulted actual paleontologists. One segment showed a T-Rex fighting a Stegosaurus, an epic clash set to classical music. The movements of the dinosaurs were more fluid and lifelike than ever before, and their behaviors were based on the best science of the time. Still, there were errors. T-Rex and Stegosaurus never lived at the same time, and the T-Rex still dragged its tail. But Fantasia marked a turning point. It showed that filmmakers were beginning to take dinosaur science more seriously. Then came the lips. Yes, lips. One of the most debated features in modern paleontology is whether T-Rex had lips that covered its teeth like lizards and salamanders, or whether its teeth were always exposed like crocodiles. In Knight's original painting, T-Rex had scaly lips, but in Fantasia, that detail vanished. The T-Rex now had its teeth on full display even when its mouth was closed. This made it look more fearsome, and that design choice would influence countless future depictions. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, more paleo art emerged. Charles Knight returned to paint another T-Rex, this time in a fierce two-dinosaur showdown. His newer T-Rexes appeared more dynamic and less stiff, hinting at the creature's potential agility. But they still had strange whip-like tails and clunky balloon-like bellies, a legacy of outdated anatomy that hadn't yet caught up with new fossil evidence. In the background, however, a quiet revolution was brewing. Scientists were beginning to rethink everything they thought they knew about dinosaurs. Were they truly slow, cold-blooded lizards? Or could they be something else entirely? That question would soon explode into the dinosaur renaissance, a scientific movement that would forever change how we saw creatures like T-Rex. But even before the science could rewrite the books, cinema had already engraved a lasting image into the minds of millions, a towering, monstrous beast with razor-sharp teeth, thundering steps, and eyes that burned with primal fury. The truth was more complicated, but truth takes time to catch up to imagination. In the 1960s and 70s, everything we thought we knew about dinosaurs began to unravel. For decades, they had been depicted as cold-blooded, sluggish reptiles, oversized lizards with limited intelligence and stiff movements. But then came a group of scientists with a bold new theory. What if dinosaurs, especially theropods like T-Rex, weren't reptiles in the traditional sense? What if they were more like birds? Leading this scientific revolution was paleontologist John Ostrom. In studying the theropod Deinonychus, he noticed anatomical features that were strikingly similar to modern birds, such as hollow bones, a semi-lunate wrist that allowed for flapping motion, and a three-toed foot structure. His work set off a wave of reconsideration across the field. If Deinonychus was bird-like, could T-Rex be the same Ostrom's colleague? Robert Bakker pushed the idea even further. He argued that dinosaurs were warm-blooded, fast-moving, and intelligent, far from the swamp-dwelling giants of earlier decades. According to Bakker T, Rex wasn't just a brute-force predator. It was a finely tuned hunting machine capable of active pursuit and possibly even social behavior. These ideas weren't immediately accepted by the broader scientific community, but they planted seeds that would grow into a full-blown revolution, the dinosaur renaissance. While the science was evolving, pop culture was about to catch up in the most spectacular way possible. In 1983, Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park exploded into theaters and changed the way the world saw dinosaurs forever. Using cutting-edge animatronics and CGI, the film brought dinosaurs to life in a way that felt real, terrifying, and awe-inspiring. At the heart of it all was the T-Rex, now faster, smarter, and more terrifying than ever. This cinematic T-Rex was a direct descendant of the dinosaur renaissance. It moved with speed and purpose, eyes alert, jaws powerful. But there was one curious detail that fans and scientists immediately noticed: the mouth. Unlike previous versions, the Jurassic Park T-Rex had something like lips, a thin membrane that partially covered its teeth when closed. It wasn't quite like lizard lips, and it wasn't just crocodile exposure. It was something new. And with that, the debate over T-Rex lips was reignited. Another major shift came with the discovery of two nearly complete T-Rex skeletons in the 1990s, Wankel and Sue. These fossils were far more complete than earlier finds, giving researchers an unprecedented look at T-Rex anatomy. They revealed a powerful build with strong legs, a massive skull, and a long muscular tail. Most importantly, the posture was now understood to be horizontal, not upright. T-Rex didn't drag its tail, it used it for balance. This alone overturned nearly a century of depictions. Biomechanical studies followed. Scientists reconstructed the likely range of motion for T-Rex's legs, the bite force of its jaws, and even the flexibility of its neck. The conclusion: T-Rex was a top-tier predator, but it was not a sprinter. It probably walked or jogged rather than chased prey at high speeds. It relied on ambush strength and an absolutely devastating bite. In 1989, the BBC released Walking with Dinosaurs, a nature documentary that dramatized prehistoric life using CGI and real-world ecosystems. Their portrayal of T-Rex was groundbreaking. It was the first time a major production aimed to depict T-Rex not as a monster, but as a real animal with behaviors based on the latest science. The documentary placed T-Rex in the Hell Creek Formation, where it interacted with contemporaries like Triceratops and Ankylosaurus. It didn't roar constantly. It didn't act like a movie villain. It behaved like a living creature. And then came feathers. In the early 2000s, scientists began uncovering feathered theropods in China. These included small species like Sinosauropteryx and Caudipteryx, and later a massive one, Eutyrannus, a large tyrannosauroid covered in primitive feathers. Suddenly, it wasn't just the small guys with the feathers. Could T-Rex have had them too? The debate exploded. Some argued that young T-Rexes may have had a feathery coat for insulation, shedding it as they grew larger. Others pointed to fossilized skin impressions of T-Rex showing scales, not feathers. Both sides had valid points. What emerged was a more nuanced view. Perhaps T-Rex had a patchy covering of feathers, or maybe only in certain life stages or climates. Either way, the old image of a green, scaly, roaring monster was fading. In its place stood a creature more complex, more mysterious, and far more real.